In the vast emptiness of space where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that even the most advanced species struggle to understand. Never underestimate the bond between a human and their loyal companion. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 12 star systems, enslaved countless worlds, and built their reputation on the broken backs of weaker species. Their military might was legendary, their technology superior, and their arrogance absolute. But they had never encountered Earth's most ancient alliance. When the first human colonies fell to Zephyrian forces, the alien invaders laughed at what they saw. Primitive projectile weapons, basic armor, and most amusing of all, humans who insisted on bringing four-legged creatures into battle. "Look at these pathetic beings," the Zephyrian commanders sneered. "They bring pets to war." They had no idea they were about to face an enemy forged through 10,000 years of unconditional loyalty, unbreakable trust, and a partnership that had survived every challenge Earth could throw at them. The Zephyrians were about to learn that when you threaten a human's family, you don't just face one enemy, you face two hearts beating as one, two minds thinking as one, and a fury that burns hotter than any star in the galaxy. They were about to discover why, throughout human history, the phrase "cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war" had never been just a metaphor. This is the story of how an empire that ruled the stars learned to fear the sound of barking in the dark. The morning sun cast long shadows across the settlement of New Montana, a human colony on the outer rim of Kepler 442b. Captain Sarah Mitchell crouched behind a makeshift barricade, her weathered hands gripping a plasma rifle that had seen better days. Beside her, a massive German shepherd named Atlas watched the horizon with intelligent amber eyes, his ears twitching at sounds only he could detect. The dog's black and tan coat was marked with scars from previous skirmishes, but his loyalty to Sarah remained unwavering. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrian Empire first appeared in their star system. The alien ships emerged from hyperspace like metallic storms, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly purple sheen. They came without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. The first colonies to fall were the mining outposts on Kepler 442a, where families had been building new lives among the red rocks and crystal formations. The survivors who managed to escape brought stories that chilled the blood of every human in the system. The Zephyrians stood nearly 9 feet tall, with elongated limbs and silver-scaled skin that reflected light like mirrors. Their heads were narrow and angular, featuring 4 black eyes arranged in a diamond pattern and mouths filled with needle-sharp teeth. They spoke in harmonious tones that could have been beautiful if not for the cruelty behind their words. Most disturbing of all were their weapons, energy-based tools that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level, leaving nothing but empty space where living beings once stood. But what truly set the Zephyrians apart was their absolute belief in their own superiority. They had conquered 12 star systems before reaching human space, enslaving species they deemed useful and eliminating those they considered worthless. Their military doctrine was built on overwhelming technological advantage and psychological warfare. They believed that fear was the most effective weapon, and they wielded it with surgical precision. When the Zephyrian Advance Force first encountered human military units, their reaction was immediate and dismissive. General Vexthara, the commanding officer of the invasion fleet, watched the tactical displays from his command ship with what could only be described as amusement. The humans carried kinetic weapons, simple projectile firearms that seemed primitive compared to Zephyrian energy weapons. Their armor was basic polymer composites, laughably inadequate against plasma fire. Their vehicles were crude combustion engine machines that would have been obsolete in most civilized worlds. But what truly baffled the Zephyrians were the 4-legged creatures that accompanied many human soldiers. These beings, which the humans called dogs, seemed to serve no tactical purpose that the aliens could understand. They carried no weapons, wore no armor, and appeared to be nothing more than biological companions. When Vexthara's intelligence officers analyzed footage of human military operations, they observed soldiers sharing food with these creatures, speaking to them in gentle tones, and even risking their own lives to protect them. The concept was so foreign to Zephyrian thinking that they initially assumed it was some form of psychological conditioning or perhaps a religious ritual. Their own culture had eliminated emotional attachments millennia ago, viewing them as weaknesses that hindered efficient conquest. The idea that an advanced species would voluntarily burden themselves with useless creatures in the middle of warfare struck them as evidence of human inferiority. During the first major engagement at the Meridian Valley, Zephyrian forces outnumbered the human defenders 3-1. Their plasma cannons carved through human positions like hot knives through ice, and their hover tanks moved across the battlefield with mechanical precision. Victory seemed assured within the first hour of combat. That's when they encountered Sergeant Marcus Chen and his partner, a Belgian Malinois named Ranger. The Zephyrians had never seen anything like the coordination between human and dog. While Marcus provided covering fire from behind a destroyed transport vehicle, Ranger moved through the battlefield like a ghost, using natural cover and his enhanced senses to gather intelligence. The dog could detect Zephyrian positions by scent and sound, from distances that amazed even his human companions. When a squad of Zephyrian infantry tried to flank Marcus's position, Ranger alerted him with a subtle change in posture that Marcus recognized instantly. The man and dog moved as one unit, Marcus laying down suppressing fire, while Ranger darted between cover points, drawing enemy attention and forcing the aliens to split their focus. It wasn't the individual actions that impressed observers, but the seamless communication between species that required no words, no technology, only trust built through years of training and companionship. The Zephyrians found themselves confused and frustrated. Their tactical computers couldn't predict the movements of the human dog teams because they couldn't quantify the emotional and intuitive elements that drove their coordination. When they targeted the humans, the dogs would alert them to incoming fire. When they targeted the dogs, the humans would respond with a ferocity that seemed to defy their own self-preservation instincts. Lieutenant Kexmora, the young Zephyrian officer observing his first human engagement, made the mistake of voicing his confusion to his superior. Why do they risk themselves for creatures that provide no tactical advantage? He asked through the harmonious tones of his species' communication method. Commander Zilfik, a veteran of 8 successful planetary conquests, dismissed the question with the casual arrogance that defined Zephyrian culture. Primitive emotional attachment, he replied, his 4 eyes focused on the tactical display. These humans haven't evolved beyond their animal instincts. They form pack bonds like the lower creatures they resemble. It's actually advantageous for us. This weakness makes them predictable. The commander ordered his forces to target the dogs specifically, believing that destroying the creatures would break human morale and cause their forces to collapse. It was the first of many catastrophic miscalculations that would define the Zephyrian campaign against humanity. When the order went out to prioritize canine targets, something changed on the human side of the battlefield. Soldiers who had been fighting with professional discipline suddenly moved with desperate intensity. Marines who had been conserving ammunition began expending their entire loads to protect their 4-legged partners. Medics abandoned their positions to reach wounded dogs, even when human casualties required attention. The Zephyrians interpreted this as confirmation of their theory about human weakness, but they failed to recognize the deeper truth. They weren't witnessing the breakdown of human military discipline. They were seeing the activation of something far more dangerous than any weapon in the human arsenal. They were seeing humans fight for family. Captain Elena Rodriguez crouched in a crater created by Zephyrian plasma fire, her tactical vest torn and her face streaked with dirt and blood. Beside her, a golden retriever named Hope pressed against her leg, the dog's calm presence providing stability in the chaos of battle. Elena had served in 3 different conflicts before the Zephyrian invasion, but she had never experienced anything like this. The aliens fought with cold efficiency, their movements precise and calculated. Their weapons were superior, their technology more advanced, their numerical advantage overwhelming. But they fought like machines, following predetermined patterns and responding to situations with algorithmic precision. They seemed incapable of adapting to the unpredictable nature of human creativity and emotion. When Hope's sensitive hearing detected the approach of a Zephyrian stealth unit, she alerted Elena with a low growl that vibrated through her chest. Elena trusted that warning completely, immediately calling for artillery support on coordinates she couldn't see but knew were accurate because Hope had indicated danger from that direction. The resulting explosion eliminated an entire enemy squad that would have otherwise achieved complete tactical surprise. The surviving Zephyrians in the area found themselves facing a problem their military training hadn't prepared them for. How do you fight an enemy that operates on intuition and emotional bonds rather than logic and tactical doctrine? How do you predict the movements of soldiers who receive intelligence from creatures with senses beyond your understanding? As the battle continued through the long day, human casualties mounted, but so did Zephyrian frustration. Their early confidence began to erode, as they realized that each human dog team they faced required different tactics. Some dogs were trained for detection and reconnaissance, others for assault and combat support. Each partnership had developed its own communication methods, its own tactical approaches, its own unpredictable responses to battlefield conditions. Private Jason Walsh found himself separated from his unit during a Zephyrian artillery barrage, alone except for his partner, a border collie named Scout. The dog's herding instincts had been adapted for military use, allowing him to keep track of multiple friendly and enemy units simultaneously, and guide Jason through the battlefield with remarkable precision. When Zephyrian forces attempted to surround Jason's position, Scout led him through a series of seemingly random movements that consistently kept them one step ahead of their pursuers. The Zephyrians began to realize that they weren't just fighting human soldiers, they were fighting an entirely different form of intelligence. The dogs possessed sensory capabilities that their own technology struggled to match, and more importantly, they shared those capabilities freely with their human partners. It was a form of biological, technological integration that Zephyrian science had never encountered. As night fell over the Meridian Valley, both sides settled into defensive positions, but the character of the battlefield had changed. The Zephyrians, who had expected to achieve victory within hours, found themselves locked in a stalemate with forces they had considered primitively equipped. Their casualty reports showed losses far higher than projected, and their tactical computers were generating error messages when trying to predict human behavior. General Vexthara reviewed the day's combat footage with growing irritation. His forces had superior firepower, better armor, and numerical advantage, yet they had failed to break human resistance. The tactical displays showed patterns that defied logical analysis, movements that seemed random but somehow always resulted in successful human operations. The general's attention kept returning to recordings of human-dog interactions. He watched as a wounded Marine crawled across open ground under heavy fire to reach his injured partner, providing medical attention to the animal while ignoring his own wounds. He observed soldiers sharing their water rations with dogs during a brief ceasefire, and he saw the way humans responded when their canine companions were threatened. These creatures serve as some form of biological sensor network, his chief intelligence officer reported. Their sensory capabilities exceed our detection equipment in several key areas, but the tactical advantage they provide doesn't explain the human emotional investment in their welfare. Vexthara nodded thoughtfully, his four eyes reflecting the glow of the command display. Emotional investment is weakness, he stated with the certainty of Zephyrian doctrine. Tomorrow we will exploit this weakness. Target the animals first, break their spirit, and the humans will surrender. It was a decision that would haunt the Zephyrian Empire for generations to come.
They had observed human behavior, analyzed human tactics, and studied human technology, but they had completely failed to understand human nature. They were about to learn that when you threaten a human's family, you don't break their spirit.
You unleash something far more dangerous than any weapon ever created. You unleash their fury. Dawn broke over the Meridian Valley like a crimson promise. The twin sons of Kepler. 442b casting an ominous red glow across the scarred battlefield. The night had been filled with the sound of Zephyrian machinery as they repositioned their forces and brought up reinforcements. General Vexthara had spent the dark hours refining his strategy, convinced that targeting the human emotional weakness would bring swift victory. Captain Sarah Mitchell hadn't slept. She moved through the human positions with Atlas at her side, checking on her soldiers and their canine partners. The overnight intelligence reports painted a grim picture. The Zephyrians had brought up heavy artillery, additional hover tanks, and what appeared to be specialized hunting units designed to track and eliminate specific targets. Intercepted communications, translated by their AI systems, revealed the alien plan with chilling clarity. The Zephyrians intended to systematically hunt down and kill every dog on the battlefield. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to scratch behind Atlas's ears, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. Around the defensive perimeter, she could see other human soldiers preparing for the day's battle, each accompanied by their loyal partners. There was Corporal Mike Santos and his Rottweiler Bruno, both veterans of the Mars Colonial Defense Force. Near the communications bunker, Lieutenant Amy Chen worked alongside her German short-haired pointer Zoe, the dog's natural intelligence making her invaluable for coordinating multiple units simultaneously. What the Zephyrians didn't understand, what their logical minds couldn't process, was that these weren't just animals to the human soldiers. These were family members, best friends, and trusted partners who had earned their places through years of shared training, shared danger, and shared trust. The aliens saw biological tools to be eliminated. The humans saw loved ones to be protected at any cost. When the Zephyrian assault began at 0800 hours, it started exactly as their intercepted plans had indicated. Specialized hunter units, sleek four-legged mechanical creatures designed to mimic terrestrial predators, moved across the battlefield with silent precision. Their mission was simple: identify and eliminate canine targets while avoiding engagement with human forces. The first hunter unit that encountered Sergeant Rodriguez and Hope made the mistake of approaching the golden retriever as if she were just another animal. Hope's response was immediate and fierce. While her breed was known for gentleness and loyalty, Military training had honed her natural protective instincts to a razor's edge. She didn't retreat or cower when the mechanical predator approached. Instead, she placed herself between the threat and Elena, her entire body language shifting from companion to guardian. Elena's reaction was even more dramatic. The moment she saw the hunter unit target Hope, something primal activated in her mind. Years of military discipline didn't disappear. They transformed into something more focused and deadly than any training had ever produced. She moved with fluid precision, her rifle tracking the mechanical threat while Hope fed her real-time intelligence through subtle body language and positioning cues that Elena read as easily as a written report. The hunter unit found itself outmatched not by superior firepower, but by superior coordination. Elena's shots were guided by Hope's sensory input, creating a targeting system more sophisticated than anything the Zephyrians had encountered. When the mechanical predator tried to use stealth protocols, Hope's nose betrayed its position. When it attempted to flank their position, Hope's hearing detected its movement long before Zephyrian sensors would have registered the threat. The destruction of the first hunter unit sent a ripple effect across both armies. The Zephyrians realized their specialized anti-dog weapons were vulnerable to the very partnerships they were designed to disrupt. The humans realized that the aliens had crossed a line that transformed the conflict from a military engagement into something far more personal and savage. Across the battlefield, similar encounters were taking place with escalating intensity. Private Jason Walsh and Scout found themselves facing 300 units simultaneously, the mechanical predators attempting to overwhelm the border collie through coordinated assault. Scout's herding instincts kicked into overdrive, treating the attackers as threats to his flock that needed to be controlled and neutralized. He moved with bewildering speed and agility, leading the hunter units into positions where Jason could engage them with maximum effectiveness. But it was the human response that truly shocked the Zephyrian observers. Jason fought with a ferocity that their psychological profiles had never predicted. When one of the hunter units managed to wound Scout with an energy discharge, Jason's tactical discipline evaporated entirely. He charged the mechanical predator with nothing but a combat knife and explosive fury, disabling it through sheer aggressive determination that overcame technological superiority. The pattern repeated across the entire front line. Human soldiers who had been fighting with professional competence suddenly displayed levels of aggression and creativity that defied Zephyrian understanding. They abandoned standard tactical procedures in favor of improvised strategies that prioritized protecting their canine partners above their own safety. They took risks that no rational military analysis would recommend, yet somehow these risks consistently resulted in successful engagements. Corporal Santos and Bruno encountered a situation that would become legendary among human forces. Surrounded by 600 units and cut off from friendly support, they found themselves facing overwhelming odds, with limited ammunition and no hope of immediate reinforcement. Bruno, sensing his partner's desperation, made a decision that demonstrated the depth of the human-canine bond. The Rottweiler charged directly at the nearest hunter unit, not to attack it, but to force it into a position where Santos could use his remaining explosives most effectively. Bruno's sacrifice created a chain reaction that destroyed 4 of the mechanical predators, though the explosion wounded him severely. Santos's response was immediate and terrifying. He fought the remaining hunter units with his bare hands, using pieces of their own destroyed companions as weapons. When rescue forces reached their position 20 minutes later, they found Santos cradling Bruno's still form, both of them bloodied but alive. The 6 hunter units lay in pieces around them, their advanced technology overcome by determination, creativity, and a bond that transcended species. The reports reaching General Vexthara painted an impossible picture. His hunter units, designed by the Empire's finest military engineers, were being systematically destroyed by primitive human soldiers and their animal companions. The tactical computers were generating error messages when trying to analyze the combat data, unable to process the unpredictable nature of emotional responses driving human behavior. The humans are fighting irrationally, his tactical advisor reported, his harmonious tones carrying notes of confusion. They expose themselves to unnecessary risk, abandon sound tactical positions, and prioritize animal welfare over strategic objectives. Yet their success rate exceeds all projections. Vexthara studied the battlefield displays with growing frustration. The mathematical models that had successfully predicted the behavior of 12 conquered species were proving useless against human forces. Worse, the hunter unit strategy had backfired catastrophically. Instead of breaking human morale, targeting their animals had transformed disciplined soldiers into something far more dangerous. The afternoon brought new horrors for the Zephyrian forces. Human tactics evolved throughout the day, adapting to counter every alien strategy with increasing effectiveness. The dogs provided sensory intelligence that allowed humans to predict Zephyrian movements with uncanny accuracy. More disturbing still, the emotional bonds between human and canine were creating tactical innovations that no military academy had ever taught. Lieutenant Chen and Zoe developed a communication system during combat that allowed them to coordinate artillery strikes with precision that amazed even veteran observers. Zoe would position herself to indicate enemy locations while Amy called in coordinates based on the dog's body language. Their success rate approached 100%, making them the most effective forward observer team in human military history. The Zephyrians found themselves facing an enemy that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Human soldiers provided the tactical thinking and weapon operation, while their canine partners supplied enhanced sensory input and emotional motivation that drove performance beyond normal limits. The combination created a synergy that their own technology couldn't match or counter. As the day progressed, Zephyrian casualties mounted, while human positions held firm. The aliens' technological advantages were being neutralized by human adaptability and the unique intelligence-gathering capabilities of their four-legged partners. Every attempt to outflank human positions was detected early by dogs with superior hearing and scent detection. Every stealth approach was betrayed by canine senses that made concealment nearly impossible. But the true psychological impact became apparent as Zephyrian survivors began returning from failed missions. Their reports described human soldiers who fought with supernatural determination, displaying courage that bordered on insanity when their animals were threatened. These accounts spread through the alien ranks like a virus, undermining the confidence that had carried them through 12 successful conquests. The evening brought a lull in combat that allowed both sides to assess the day's events. For the Zephyrians, it had been a disaster that challenged every assumption about human capabilities. For the humans, it had been a revelation that their partnership with dogs created advantages that no amount of technological superiority could overcome. Captain Mitchell moved through her sector as darkness fell, checking on her people and their partners. The day's combat had been brutal, but human casualties were far lower than anyone had dared hope. More importantly, the bond between soldiers and dogs had been tested under the most extreme conditions and proven unbreakable. She found Private Walsh sitting beside Scout, both of them bandaged but alert. The border collie's tail wagged weakly when he saw her approach, and Jason looked up with eyes that held new understanding of what they were truly fighting for. "They don't get it, do they, Captain?" Jason asked, his voice hoarse from shouting commands during the day's battles. "They think we're weak because we love our dogs. They don't understand that love makes us stronger, not weaker." Sarah nodded, scratching Atlas behind the ears as the German shepherd leaned against her leg. Around them, the sounds of an army preparing for another day of combat filled the night air. But there was something different in those sounds now. Something the Zephyrians would learn to fear. It was the sound of humans who knew exactly what they were fighting for, and who had discovered that their greatest strength lay not in their weapons or their technology, but in the ancient bond between human and dog that had survived every challenge Earth could provide. The aliens had wanted to exploit human weakness, but they had instead awakened human fury. Tomorrow would bring new horrors for the Zephyrian Empire, as they learned that underestimating the human capacity for loyalty and love was the gravest mistake any enemy could make. The third day of battle began before dawn, but not with the mechanical precision the Zephyrians expected. Instead, it started with something that sent chills through their advanced sensors: the sound of howling. Across the human defensive lines, dozens of dogs lifted their voices in an ancient song that had echoed across battlefields throughout human history. It wasn't random noise or animal fear. It was communication, coordination, and something deeper that the aliens couldn't comprehend. Atlas led the chorus from Captain Mitchell's position, his deep voice carrying across the valley. One by one, other dogs joined in, creating a symphony of sound that spoke to something primal in every human soldier. They understood, in ways their alien enemies never could, that this was the sound of the pack preparing for war. General Vexara listened to the recordings of the howling with 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. His xenobiology experts had analyzed the sound patterns for hours, searching for tactical significance or coded communications. They found complex harmonics and coordinated timing, but nothing that fit their understanding of military protocols. "It appears to be some form of psychological warfare," his chief science officer reported. "The acoustic patterns are designed to intimidate enemies while boosting morale among allied forces. Primitive but potentially effective." What the Zephyrians failed to understand was that the howling wasn't just psychological warfare. It was the activation of something far more dangerous than any weapon they had encountered. The dogs were communicating across the battlefield, sharing information about enemy positions, pack status, and threat assessments in ways that transcended individual partnerships. They were functioning as a distributed intelligence network that their human partners could tap into intuitively. Lieutenant Chen noticed it first as she worked with Zoe to coordinate morning reconnaissance. The German short-haired pointer was receiving information from other dogs across the battlefield, her posture and attention shifting as she processed signals that Amy couldn't hear but somehow understood. When Zoe indicated enemy movement in Sector 7, Amy trusted that intelligence completely, even though their position provided no visual confirmation. The artillery strike she called based on Zoe's intelligence eliminated a Zephyrian infiltration team that would have compromised the entire eastern flank. The success wasn't coincidental. Somewhere across the battlefield, another dog had detected the alien movement and communicated that information through the pack network to Zoe, who then translated it for Amy through their established partnership protocols. Sergeant Rodriguez experienced the phenomenon more directly when Hope suddenly tensed and looked toward the northern perimeter. The Golden Retriever's attention wasn't focused on any immediate threat to their position, but rather on something happening nearly a kilometer away. Elena trusted her partner's instincts and immediately contacted units in that sector, warning them of possible enemy activity. The response confirmed what Elena was beginning to suspect. Private Walsh reported that Scout had detected a large Zephyrian force moving through the northern ravines, approaching positions that would have allowed them to attack human forces from behind. The Border Collie's natural intelligence and herding instincts had identified the threat, and somehow that information had been communicated to Hope across impossible distances. The Zephyrians found themselves facing an enemy that operated on multiple levels of communication they couldn't monitor or disrupt. Human radio communications followed predictable patterns that their technology could intercept and decode, but the pack network operated on sensory inputs, emotional connections, and instinctive understanding that transcended traditional intelligence gathering. Corporal Santos discovered the tactical implications when Bruno began displaying behavior patterns that indicated specific types of enemy presence. The Rottweiler had always been protective and alert, but now his responses were becoming more sophisticated and precise. When he adopted a particular stance, it meant Zephyrian infantry were approaching. A different posture indicated armored vehicles. A third signal warned of aerial threats. The remarkable aspect wasn't just Bruno's ability to distinguish between different enemy types, but his capacity to learn and adapt those signals based on feedback from other dogs across the battlefield. The pack was sharing tactical knowledge, creating a collective intelligence that enhanced every individual partnership. Captain Mitchell watched this evolution with growing amazement and strategic appreciation. Her background included advanced military intelligence training, and she recognized what she was witnessing: the emergence of a biological intelligence network that operated faster and more efficiently than any electronic system the humans possessed. The dogs were creating real-time battlefield awareness that gave human forces advantages their technological limitations had never allowed. But the Zephyrians were adapting too. General Voxthara had spent the night analyzing human tactical patterns, searching for weaknesses he could exploit. His conclusion was that the animal-human partnerships created predictable vulnerabilities that proper strategy could overcome. "Deploy the fear protocols," he ordered his tactical commanders. "If these creatures communicate through emotional channels, we will flood those channels with terror. Break their network, and we break their resistance." The Zephyrian fear protocols involve psychological warfare weapons designed to induce panic in enemy forces, sound frequencies that triggered instinctive flight responses, pheromone dispersers that created artificial sense of predators, and visual displays that activated deep-seated evolutionary fears. They had proven effective against 8 previous enemy species, breaking military discipline and causing armies to collapse into chaos. When the alien psychological weapons activated across the battlefield, they initially seemed to work exactly as intended. Several dogs showed signs of distress, whining and displaying anxiety behaviors that worried their human partners. The pack communications became more urgent and agitated, with rapid exchanges of information that suggested fear and confusion. But instead of breaking the human-dog partnerships, the fear protocols triggered something the Zephyrians hadn't anticipated. The humans responded to their partners' distress with protective fury that transformed the entire character of the battle. Soldiers who had been fighting with professional discipline suddenly fought with personal vengeance. Private Walsh's response was typical of the human reaction. When Scout showed signs of fear from the alien psychological weapons, Jason's anger toward the Zephyrians intensified beyond anything he had ever experienced. The idea that the aliens would deliberately terrorize his partner, his friend, his family member, awakened something primal and deadly in his mind. He abandoned his defensive position and began hunting Zephyrian forces with methodical determination. Scout, sensing his partner's protective rage, overcame his own fear and joined the hunt with enhanced focus. The Border Collie's natural intelligence combined with Jason's tactical training to create a predator-prey dynamic that the aliens had never faced. The pattern repeated across the battlefield as human soldiers responded to threats against their canine partners with escalating aggression. The Zephyrians discovered that their psychological weapons had backfired catastrophically, transforming disciplined human forces into something far more dangerous and unpredictable. Sergeant Rodriguez led a counterattack against a Zephyrian position that had been using fear weapons against the dogs in her sector. Hope, despite her earlier distress, moved with deadly precision through the alien defenses. Her natural retriever instincts adapted to locate and indicate enemy positions. Elena followed her partner's guidance with complete trust, engaging targets that Hope identified with accuracy that amazed even veteran observers. The Zephyrian defenders found themselves overwhelmed by an attack that operated on sensory inputs they couldn't detect or counter. Hope's superior hearing and scent detection allowed Elena to anticipate enemy movements, while the dog's emotional connection to her human partner provided motivation that transcended normal military training. As the battle intensified, the pack network evolved into something even more sophisticated. Dogs began coordinating not just information sharing, but tactical responses that supported human operations across the entire battlefield. When Captain Mitchell's position came under heavy assault, Atlas communicated their situation through the pack network, and responses came from unexpected directions. Bruno and Corporal Santos appeared from the east, having received intelligence through the dog network and positioned themselves to provide flanking fire against the attacking Zephyrians. Zoe and Lieutenant Chen provided artillery coordination from the west, using pack-derived intelligence to place supporting fire with surgical precision. Scout and Private Walsh approached from the north, their combined reconnaissance abilities allowing them to identify and neutralize enemy command positions. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that operated like a single organism with multiple specialized components. Human tactical thinking combined with canine sensory input created a hybrid intelligence that adapted to battlefield conditions faster than their own computer systems could process changes. General Vexthera watched his tactical displays with growing desperation. His forces maintained technological superiority and numerical advantages, but human casualties remained far below projected levels while Zephyrian losses mounted beyond acceptable parameters. The fear protocols had not only failed to break human resistance, they had somehow strengthened it. The emotional bonds between species are creating tactical advantages we cannot counter, his science officer reported. Their animal companions are providing sensory intelligence that exceeds our detection capabilities, while their emotional responses to threats against those companions are driving performance beyond normal biological limits. The general's 4 eyes focused on recordings of human dog teams operating in perfect coordination despite communications disruption and battlefield chaos. He was witnessing something that challenged fundamental Zephyrian assumptions about the nature of intelligence and military effectiveness. Prepare the final protocol, he ordered after long minutes of thought. If we cannot break their emotional bonds, we will use those bonds to destroy them. Target the animals for capture, not elimination. Force the humans to choose between tactical advantage and emotional attachment. It was another miscalculation that would haunt the Zephyrian Empire. They still failed to understand that humans didn't see dogs as tactical assets that could be sacrificed for strategic advantage. They saw them as family members whose safety justified any risk, any sacrifice, any level of violence necessary to ensure their protection. The aliens were about to learn that threatening to harm a human's family doesn't create tactical dilemmas. It creates something far more dangerous. It creates enemies who will fight beyond reason, beyond strategy, beyond any concept of acceptable losses. They were about to discover why humans had never lost a war when they fought for the people they loved, whether those people walked on 2 legs or 4. As night fell over the Meridian Valley, the howling began again. But this time it carried a different tone, a deeper harmony, that spoke of pack unity forged in combat and tested under fire. The dogs were singing a song of war that their human partners understood in their bones, a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. The Zephyrians listened to that sound with growing unease, beginning to suspect that they had not encountered a primitive human weakness. They had awakened something ancient and terrible, that had survived every challenge in Earth's violent history. The unbreakable bond between human and dog, tested in the crucible of battle and proven stronger than any weapon the galaxy could devise. The 4th day brought something the Zephyrians had never experienced in their campaigns of conquest. The hunters had become the hunted. General Vexthara's decision to capture dogs rather than eliminate them had transformed the battlefield into a nightmare of reversed roles. where technologically superior alien forces found themselves stalked by primitive human soldiers who moved with the cunning of apex predators. The change began at first light when Scout detected the approach of Zephyrian capture teams. Private Walsh felt his partner's tension through their bond, understanding immediately that something different was happening. The Border Collie's body language indicated threat, but not the immediate danger signals that had preceded previous attacks. This was the alert posture of a sheepdog who had identified wolves approaching the flock. Jason's response was swift and deadly. Instead of taking defensive positions as military doctrine suggested, Ian Scout began actively hunting the hunters. The Border Collie's natural intelligence and herding instincts made him perfectly suited for tracking and outmaneuvering enemies who thought they were pursuing him. Scout led his human partner through a complex series of movements that drew the Zephyrian capture team into positions where Jason could eliminate them one by one. The aliens found themselves facing tactics they couldn't understand or counter. Their capture equipment was designed to subdue animals through technological superiority, but Scout and Jason operated as a unified predator that used intelligence, terrain knowledge, and emotional motivation to overcome advanced weaponry. When the last member of the capture team fell to Jason's rifle, the message was clear. The humans weren't going to allow their partners to be taken without a fight that would cost far more than the aliens were prepared to pay. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human dog teams transformed from defensive units into aggressive hunters. Captain Mitchell and Atlas began systematically eliminating Zephyrian positions that threatened other dogs, moving through alien lines with stealth and precision that amazed even experienced Special Forces observers. The German Shepherd's senses provided intelligence that allowed Sarah to avoid detection, while positioning herself for maximum tactical advantage. The Zephyrians discovered that their capture strategy had created a tactical nightmare. Every attempt to take a dog resulted in immediate and overwhelming human response from directions they couldn't predict or defend against. Worse, the pack network ensured that threats to any canine partner were communicated instantly to all human dog teams in the area, creating coordinated responses that overwhelmed isolated alien units. Sergeant Rodriguez and Hope pioneered new hunting techniques that other teams quickly adopted. The Golden Retriever's natural retrieving instincts had been adapted for military reconnaissance, allowing her to identify and track enemy movements through terrain that concealed them from human senses. Elena followed Hope's guidance with complete trust, engaging targets that appeared at exactly the locations her partner had indicated. But what truly terrified the Zephyrians was the way human tactics evolved throughout the day. Each successful hunt taught the human dog teams new methods for stalking and eliminating alien forces. The pack network spread these innovations instantly, creating a collective learning experience that enhanced every partnership simultaneously. Lieutenant Chen and Zoe developed coordination techniques that allowed them to direct other human dog teams against specific targets with artillery precision. Zoe's intelligence gathering combined with Amy's tactical training created a command and control system that operated faster and more efficiently than any electronic network the humans possessed. When Zephyrian forces tried to concentrate against isolated human positions, they found themselves facing coordinated responses from teams that appeared to know their movements before they made them. The psychological impact on Zephyrian forces was devastating. Soldiers who had conquered 12-star systems with technological superiority and overwhelming firepower now found themselves afraid to leave their positions. The humans had become ghosts that struck without warning and vanished before retaliation was possible, leaving only dead aliens and empty capture equipment as evidence of their passage. Corporal Santos and Bruno demonstrated the evolution of human-dog hunting partnerships when they encountered a heavily armed Zephyrian patrol equipped with advanced capture technology. Instead of engaging directly, they shadowed the alien unit for over an hour, gathering intelligence while Bruno tracked their movements through scent and sound that revealed tactical patterns. When Santos finally attacked, it was with knowledge of enemy movement protocols, equipment capabilities, and individual soldier positioning that allowed him to eliminate the entire patrol without taking casualties. Bruno's contribution wasn't just sensory input, but tactical intelligence that transformed a dangerous engagement into a methodical elimination of threats. The Zephyrians began requesting reinforcements with increasing desperation, but General Vextara was discovering that numerical superiority meant nothing against enemies who operated outside conventional tactical parameters. His computer models couldn't predict human behavior because they were designed to analyze logical military responses, not the chaotic creativity of soldiers fighting for emotional rather than strategic objectives. The afternoon brought new horrors as human hunting teams began penetrating deep into Zephyrian-held territory. Private Walsh and Scout led a reconnaissance mission that resulted in the destruction of an alien command post. Scout's natural ability to move silently through unfamiliar terrain allowed Jason to approach targets that considered themselves untouchable. The success of these deep penetration missions spread panic through Zephyrian ranks. Command structures that had functioned efficiently during previous conquests found themselves under constant threat from enemies who appeared and disappeared like malevolent spirits. Officers who had built their careers on technological dominance were dying from primitive projectile weapons fired by soldiers who seemed to anticipate their movements with supernatural accuracy.
Captain Mitchell received reports of successful hunts from teams across the battlefield, each account revealing new techniques and tactics that the pack network was spreading through the human forces. The dogs weren't just providing sensory input, they were enabling their human partners to think and move like predators in ways that military training had never taught.
The Zephyrians attempted to counter human hunting tactics by deploying their most advanced stealth technology, but they discovered that mechanical stealth was useless against biological senses that had evolved to detect subtle signs of life. Dogs could identify cloaked enemies through scent, sound, and electromagnetic signatures that alien technology couldn't mask. Sergeant Rodriguez and Hope proved this when they detected and eliminated an entire Zephyrian stealth unit that had been positioned to ambush human reinforcements. Hope's nose identified alien scents that were undetectable to human senses, while her hearing picked up mechanical sounds that were filtered out by Zephyrian noise suppression systems. Elena trusted her partner's warnings completely, calling in artillery strikes on positions that appeared empty but contained deadly threats. As evening approached, the tactical situation had reversed completely. Zephyrian forces found themselves trapped in defensive positions while human dog teams moved freely through territory that should have been under alien control. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were discovering that humans made far more dangerous predators than any species they had previously encountered. General Vextheris studied casualty reports with 4 eyes that reflected shock and growing fear. His technologically superior forces were being systematically eliminated by primitive enemies who operated with efficiency that exceeded his most optimistic projections for his own troops. The capture strategy had failed so catastrophically that he was beginning to question fundamental assumptions about warfare itself. The humans are not fighting like any enemy we have previously encountered. His tactical advisor reported with harmonious tones that carried notes of barely controlled panic. They operate as individual units but coordinate like a single organism. Their animal companions provide capabilities that our technology cannot match or counter. Most disturbing, they appear to be learning and adapting faster than our computer systems can process tactical changes. The general nodded slowly, his attention focused on recordings of human dog teams operating in perfect coordination despite communications disruption and overwhelming odds. He was witnessing the emergence of a new form of warfare that challenged everything the Zephyrian Empire had learned about conquest and military dominance. The reports from field commanders painted an impossible picture. Human soldiers who should have been overwhelmed by superior numbers and technology were instead hunting Zephyrian forces with methodical precision. Their animal companions weren't just providing sensory support, they were enabling tactical innovations that his military academies had never anticipated. The evening brought new intelligence that confirmed Vexthar's worst fears. Human hunting teams were no longer content to operate within their own defensive perimeter. They were actively seeking out Zephyrian positions throughout the valley, eliminating alien forces with efficiency that suggested they possessed detailed knowledge of enemy movements and positions. Private Walsh and Scout had penetrated so deeply into Zephyrian territory that they were operating behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and eliminating targets that threatened other human dog teams. Their success rate was impossible by any rational analysis, yet the evidence was undeniable. A single human soldier and his canine partner were causing more damage to Zephyrian forces than entire divisions had suffered in previous campaigns. The psychological warfare aspect was becoming as dangerous as the tactical losses. Zephyrian soldiers who had built their confidence on technological superiority were beginning to fear enemies they couldn't detect, couldn't predict, and couldn't counter. The sound of barking in the distance had become an omen of death that sent experienced warriors into states of near panic. Captain Mitchell coordinated the evening's operations with a sense of grim satisfaction. Her forces had not only held their positions against overwhelming odds, they had seized tactical initiative from an enemy that possessed every technological advantage. The key was the pack network that allowed human dog teams to operate as a collective intelligence while maintaining the flexibility and creativity of individual partnerships. Atlas leaned against her leg as she reviewed the day's reports, his presence providing emotional stability that enhanced her tactical thinking. Around them, the sounds of an army that had learned to hunt filled the night air. There were no victory celebrations, no premature confidence, just the quiet satisfaction of predators who knew they had found their hunting ground. The Zephyrians listened to those sounds with growing dread, beginning to understand that they had made an enemy of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They had threatened the bonds between humans and dogs, and in response, they had awakened predators whose loyalty to each other made them unstoppable. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of lessons learned, through 4 days of escalating conflict. The aliens were about to discover that when humans fought for family, they didn't just win battles. They eliminated enemies so completely that the survivors carried warnings to the ends of the galaxy. The fifth day dawned with silence that felt heavier than any bombardment the Zephyrians had unleashed. General Vexthara stood before his tactical displays, watching red indicators that marked the positions of human dog teams throughout territory that should have been under alien control. In 4 days of combat, his technologically superior forces had been reduced from confident conquerors to trapped survivors, hunted by enemies who defied every principle of warfare his empire had ever encountered. The night had brought reports that challenged his understanding of reality itself. Human dog teams had penetrated so deeply into Zephyrian positions that they were operating within sight of the alien command ship. Private Walsh and Scout had eliminated 3 officer cadres, disrupting communications and creating chaos that spread through the alien ranks like a virus. Sergeant Rodriguez and Hope had destroyed 2 ammunition depots, causing secondary explosions that lit the pre-dawn sky with funeral fires for Zephyrian ambitions. Most disturbing of all, the humans were no longer fighting defensively. They had transitioned to total offensive operations, systematically hunting down every alien presence in the Meridian Valley with methodical precision that suggested complete tactical superiority despite their primitive equipment. Captain Mitchell moved through what had once been Zephyrian territory with Atlas at her side, both of them alert, but confident in ways that would have seemed impossible 5 days earlier. The German Shepherd's senses painted a detailed picture of the battlefield that revealed scattered alien survivors hiding in positions that offered concealment but no real security. The pack network had evolved into something that military theorists would study for generations. Dogs across the battlefield shared information with instantaneous speed and perfect accuracy, creating a real-time intelligence system that made stealth impossible for their enemies. Every Zephyrian movement was detected, analyzed, and reported to human teams positioned to respond with overwhelming force. Lieutenant Chen coordinated what would become known as the Final Hunt, directing human dog teams against specific targets with precision that eliminated alien resistance before it could organize effective responses. Zoe's intelligence gathering had identified the locations of every remaining Zephyrian unit, while Amy's tactical expertise turned that knowledge into a systematic elimination campaign. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that operated with supernatural knowledge of their positions and capabilities. Human soldiers appeared at exactly the right locations, with exactly the right weapons to overcome any defense the Zephyrians could mount. Worse, they operated with emotional determination that transformed every engagement into a life-or-death struggle where surrender wasn't an option the humans seemed willing to accept. Corporal Santos and Bruno demonstrated the complete evolution of human-dog partnerships during the morning's operations. They approached a fortified Zephyrian position with tactics that combined military training, canine intelligence, and emotional bonds that created capabilities neither species could achieve alone. Bruno's senses identified enemy positions while his protective instincts motivated tactical decisions that prioritized both mission success and his partner's survival. The result was an assault that eliminated 12 alien soldiers without exposing Santos to significant risk. The Rottweiler's natural aggression, enhanced by military training and motivated by loyalty to his human partner, created a weapon that Zephyrian defenses couldn't counter or comprehend. When the position fell, it did so with efficiency that demonstrated how completely the tactical balance had shifted. General Vexthara received reports of these engagements with growing desperation. His forces were being eliminated by enemies who possessed inferior technology but superior coordination, enhanced by animal companions whose capabilities exceeded his empire's most advanced sensors. The capture strategy had backfired so catastrophically that it had transformed disciplined human defenders into relentless predators who seemed incapable of fatigue or mercy. Request immediate withdrawal authorization. He transmitted to the Imperial Fleet Command, his harmonious tones carrying notes of barely controlled panic. Human resistance exceeds all projections. Their animal-human partnerships create tactical advantages that our forces cannot counter. Continued engagement risks complete mission failure with total force elimination. The response from Fleet Command was swift and uncompromising. Withdrawal denied. Complete conquest objectives or accept responsibility for Empire's first military failure. Vexthara understood the implications immediately. The Zephyrian Empire's reputation was built on the fear that resistance was futile against their technological superiority. A defeat at the hands of primitive human forces would encourage rebellion throughout their conquered territories and attract attention from rival empires who had previously considered Zephyrian power unassailable. But the alternative was the complete destruction of his invasion force by enemies who fought with determination that transcended rational military analysis. The humans had demonstrated that emotional bonds could create tactical advantages that technology couldn't overcome, and their animal companions provided capabilities that alien science couldn't replicate or counter. The afternoon brought the climax of 5 days of escalating conflict as human-dog teams launched coordinated attacks against every remaining Zephyrian position simultaneously. Private Walsh and Scout led an assault on the alien command bunker, their combined reconnaissance abilities allowing them to approach undetected through defenses that should have been impenetrable. Scout's natural intelligence and herding instincts had been adapted for military operations that turned him into a four-legged Special Forces operative. He moved through alien security systems like a ghost, identifying threats and guiding Jason through defensive networks that Zephyrian engineers had designed to stop conventional attacks. When they reached the command bunker, it was with knowledge of enemy positions and capabilities that allowed Jason to eliminate the guards with precision that left the officers inside defenseless. Sergeant Rodriguez and Hope approached their target from an entirely different direction, using the Golden Retriever's natural retrieving instincts to gather intelligence about enemy equipment and personnel. Hope's ability to identify and track specific scents allowed Elena to map Zephyrian positions with accuracy that exceeded any technological reconnaissance system. When their assault began, it was with complete knowledge of enemy capabilities and perfect timing that coordinated with attacks throughout the battlefield. The Zephyrians found themselves facing simultaneous threats from directions they couldn't predict, delivered by enemies who seemed to know their defensive plans better than they did themselves. The pack network reached its ultimate evolution as dogs across the battlefield coordinated not just information sharing, but tactical responses that supported human operations with supernatural precision. When Captain Mitchell's team encountered heavy resistance, Atlas communicated their situation through channels that brought immediate support from every human-dog team within range. Bruno and Santos appeared from the west, having received intelligence through the dog network, and positioned themselves to provide flanking fire. Zoe and Chen coordinated artillery strikes from the east, using pack-derived targeting data to place supporting fire within meters of enemy positions. Scout and Walsh approached from the north, their reconnaissance abilities allowing them to eliminate command and control elements that would have coordinated effective resistance. General Vexthera watched his tactical displays with the growing realization that he was witnessing the birth of a new form of warfare. Human-dog teams were operating as a single distributed organism that combined the best aspects of biological intelligence, emotional motivation, and tactical innovation. As technologically superior forces were being overwhelmed by enemies who fought with capabilities that his empire had never encountered and couldn't understand. The final assault on the Zephyrian command ship came at sunset, led by human-dog teams who had learned to fight as apex predators over 5 days of escalating conflict. Captain Mitchell and Atlas moved through alien defenses like a force of nature, their partnership having evolved into something that transcended the sum of its parts. Atlas's senses provided intelligence that allowed Sarah to anticipate enemy movements, while her tactical expertise turned that knowledge into devastating attacks that eliminated resistance before it could organize effective responses. They moved through the ship's corridors like hunters who knew every detail of their prey's territory, striking with precision that left no room for alien countermeasures. When they reached the bridge where General Vexthara waited with his remaining officers, it was with the knowledge that they had completely destroyed Zephyrian forces throughout the Meridian Valley. The alien commander faced enemies who had proven that technological superiority meant nothing against determination, loyalty, and bonds that transcended species. "Your empire made a mistake when it threatened our families," Sarah said simply. Atlas standing beside her with alert readiness that promised violence if the aliens made any hostile moves. "We don't fight just for territory or resources. We fight for the people we love, and that makes us unbeatable." Vexthara looked at the human captain and her canine partner with 4 eyes that reflected something his species had never experienced: complete tactical defeat at the hands of enemies they had considered primitively equipped. The dog returned his gaze with intelligent amber eyes that held no fear, only protective alertness that demonstrated the depth of the bond that had proven stronger than any weapon the Zephyrian Empire possessed. The transmission that went out to the Imperial fleet carried a message that would echo through Zephyrian space for generations. Human forces have achieved complete tactical victory. Recommend immediate withdrawal from human territory. Advise all Imperial forces that humans possess capabilities that exceed our ability to counter or comprehend. Their animal companions provide tactical advantages that our technology cannot match. But the real message was simpler and more terrible for an empire built on the fear of their superiority. The humans had won because they fought for love, and against that weapon, no technology in the galaxy could stand. As the Zephyrian survivors retreated to their ships, they carried with them stories that would become legends of terror throughout their empire. They spoke of human soldiers who fought with supernatural determination, guided by animal companions whose loyalty made them unstoppable.
They told of battles where primitive weapons had overcome advanced technology through bonds that transcended rational understanding.
The evacuation of Meridian Valley marked the end of the Zephyrian invasion, but the beginning of something far more significant. Word of the human victory spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carrying a message that resonated with every oppressed species under alien rule. Resistance was possible, even against overwhelming technological superiority, if you had something worth fighting for. Captain Mitchell stood on the ridge overlooking the valley as the last Zephyrian ship disappeared into hyperspace, Atlas leaning against her leg in the comfortable companionship that had carried them through 5 days of impossible victory. Around them, other human dog teams watched their enemies retreat, knowing they had proven something that would be remembered as long as humans and dogs shared the bonds of loyalty and love. They had shown the galaxy that technology without heart was no match for determination with purpose. They had demonstrated that the ancient partnership between human and dog, forged through 10,000 years of shared evolution, could overcome any challenge the universe could devise. Most importantly, they had proven that when humans fought for family, they didn't just win battles. They created legends that would inspire resistance movements throughout the galaxy, carrying the message that no empire was invincible when faced with enemies who understood that love was the strongest weapon ever created. The Zephyrians had mocked the human soldiers and their four-legged companions, but they would never make that mistake again. The dogs of war had been unleashed, and they had taught the galaxy that underestimating the power of loyalty and love was a lesson that could only be learned once. They mocked the human soldiers, then faced the deadly war dogs. HFY Sci-Fi.